live.
Good evening, everyone. This is such an exciting occasion. It's our first visit from an author from Iceland, right? Now, I'm going to try once again, Ragnar Jonasson. Is that close?
Yeah, very good.
Or you're just being kind.
No, it's good.
You want to introduce yourself and then we'll know for sure?
Ragnar Jonasson.
See? I know I couldn't quite do it. I practiced forever to say you, nesbø, and you could probably say that one better too.
Jo Nesbø.
Yo?
Jo Nesbø.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So is Icelandic in any way related to Norwegian?
It's very much related. It was Old Norwegian. It basically is Old Norwegian.
Oh.
Because we had the Norwegians settle Iceland 1,000 years ago or so. And the language basically has remained more or less the same in Iceland, while the Norwegian language has evolved quite a bit.
So did you have fewer incomers for centuries?
Yeah.
With the climate and other things?
Yeah, and with being an island far away, so there wasn't a lot of tourists until recently. So we can still read books that were written in the 1100s, 1200s, the old Icelandic sagas.
Right.
The language is pretty much the same as it was, so you can read it sort of fairly easily for a modern reader. Well, usually for old English or something like that, it's much more difficult for modern speakers to read.
What is the name of the principal Icelandic saga? I used to know it.
There are a few.
Not an Icelandic.
Njál's saga is one of them. Njál's, yeah. It's probably the biggest, or Egil's saga. But they are basically, some of them are like crime novels of their age, because it's like Njál's saga is like a court, basically a legal drama in a way, and a lot of people are killed.
Doesn't Iceland have, I'm going to betray my ignorance here, but isn't there kind of a large parliament that meets, where's it, Thingvellir or some such place? Do the sagas, relate to that, or is that form of government tied into this old system?
It is in a way. We have the oldest sort of sitting parliament in the world, right, from 930, and it used to. It's called Alþingi, and it used to meet, at Thingvellir, this old site, this heritage site in Iceland, and now obviously it meets just in Reykjavik in a parliament building. But but it is sort of strongly linked to this old.
So I was asking Ragnar, I'm going to go with Ragnar, you can figure it out. Crime fiction, it was primarily in English form, and so for a long, long time, it was exported to other countries and translated into the native language there. But there's been a big turnaround, and now authors are writing crime fiction in their own language in their own country, and it comes here and is translated. And I meant to ask you, because Quentin Bates, I first heard of him when he wrote a book about, I thought it was about Alaska, for Soho Press. Is that right, Kathy? You're nodding your head over there.
I remember him from a book that I think it was a series. It was set in Iceland.
In Iceland, rather than Alaska. I'm just going north and into ice, but confusing the country. Okay, but doesn't he translate your books into English?
Yeah.
That's the reason I brought it up?
Yeah. He used to translate, he did my first series.
Okay.
I have a different translator now because it's a different publisher, but he did the first 5 books into English, and he did indeed write books set in Iceland. He used to live in Iceland, but he's British, but his wife is Icelandic. So he writes this series about a policewoman called Gunnhildur.
So you started out writing 5 books now, is it, in the Dark Iceland series?
Yeah.
And the principal character is Ari Thor?
Yeah, that's right.
And, what was your inspiration for Ari Thor?
So he's, when we meet him, he's a young guy who's moving to the northernmost town in Iceland called Siglufjörður. And that's actually the town where my father grew up, where my grandparents lived most of their lives, so it's a place I'm very familiar with.
Is that to the northwest of Akureyri?
Yeah, or almost just to the north of Akureyri.
Okay.
And it's a very sort of beautiful place, and it's also I thought it was also would be a good place for a crime novel setting, because you can only get there through a tunnel, so it's very isolated, and in the winter it gets very dark. There's a lot of snow there, and even like avalanches that close off the road into town. And in the summer it's very bright, often even warmer than south of Iceland. It has almost a 24-hour daylight in the middle of July. So it's a place of like great contrasts. So that's basically why I decided to set my first series there in Siglufjörður and around at the northern part. And Ari was created as like I thought I would have a young guy. I have been translating Agatha Christie, and I'm a big fan of her books. And I remember that she said in her autobiography that she always regretted making her detectives too old at the beginning of their careers, so she couldn't grow old with them. They were both retired in a way when we meet them, and then she wrote about them for 50 years.
Just one day or 1 month at a time.
Yeah.
Right? That's still right. Miss Marple was ageless, and so was Barbara.
Basically, yeah. So I thought, if this would, when I did the first book, I thought, if this would become a series, it's good that probably a good idea that I keep this guy a little bit younger than I am, so he can, he can grow a little bit older with me, and also we can have some of this sort of shared experiences just generally because of being, around the similar age. But then I, turned that upside down when I started my new series, when I write about a 64-year-old woman.
Who's growing younger.
And she grows younger every book. So that series is told in reverse. So we start with her at 64 when she's retiring and doing her last case, and then she's 50 in the next one, and then she's 40, and even in her 30s in the fourth book. So
certain fantasy element creeping in there. We're all looking envious. So you mentioned you only can reach it by tunnel, but that would be from land, but you can reach it by boat?
Yes.
Because I'm pretty sure, because I've been to Akureyri, I'm pretty sure that we actually sailed by it.
You might have.
Right, and stopped there.
Yeah, because they do a lot of cruise ships now in the summer.
Right.
So you can reach it by boat, and before the tunnel was built in the 1960s, I think. Before that, the only way to get there was by boat or by crossing a big mountain. And that mountain
so the tunnel
was
goes through the mountain?
Yeah.
Okay, it's not under the sea.
No, it's not. No. Yeah, it's through a mountain. And but since I wrote the first book, which is almost 10 years ago now, they've actually built another tunnel. So so they have two tunnels from different directions. So the town, unfortunately, for crime fiction, doesn't get closed off in reality anymore, because it's very difficult for Siglufjörður to be closed off now because you have to.
But that might be a bonus in the sense that now you've got more people coming in who can reasonably be murdered or possessed. You were otherwise heading towards Cabot Cove.
I know. I was very conscious of Jessica Fletcher. Right.
So that's a plus. But if you're a Christie translator, then the idea of the country house becoming in fact this village, a closed environment where only X number of people can possibly be involved, is a very Christie concept.
Yeah, absolutely, and that really fascinates me. The fewer the suspects, the better. And if you can have a closed environment in some way, so so the story is basically about the psychology of a few people and trying to figure out how or why something happened, rather than you're going all over a big town.
Well, you also drill down deeper into the few people if you're.
Absolutely, yeah. You can look even further into each and every person, and actually for the new series, I'm sort of working with that, because there's a book coming out in May called
Right.
The Island, and then we have a small island that's a real place. It's off the south coast of Iceland, and then we have just 4 people that spend a weekend there. This island where no one lives. There's just one house there, and one of them dies. So basically there are just 3 people who could have done it. And for the 3rd book in that series, which it's called The Mist, then we only have like 3 people in a house at Christmas in the Icelandic countryside, far away from everyone. So there's this couple who live there and a stranger who knocks on their door the day before Christmas Eve.
You can't reasonably take it down any lower than 3.
That's what I've been thinking. I mean, could I pull it off to like 2 people or 1? I don't know.
Well, it would have to be.
Suicide.
I don't know that you could do something
Leaves
with
the
2, but
mystery on
it
it.
really couldn't be a murder. You could have some sort of crime or something going on where it could be one person or the other, but you can't both be dead, right? Or yes, no, I see you've got a structural issue there. But there's a lot of wonderful places. My daughter and I, on the last time I was in Iceland, we were on a very large cruise ship. And there's a very narrow entrance into whatever the town is, and I don't know how to pronounce it properly. Hamay, how do you pronounce it?
Yeah. Hey,
Hamay.
Yeah.
Okay.
which is actually very close to the island where the
Right.
book is
No,
set.
I-
It's a part of that cluster of islands.
So this huge cruise ship wants to go in, and the weather is terrible, and the captain says he doesn't think he can do it, but he's consulting with headquarters in Seattle about whether they really want him to risk the ship. And eventually, having come out, and he's from Florida, and he said, well, in Florida, when we have hurricanes, we just throw all the furniture in the pool and jump in after them. So he was prepared to try to do the same thing with his ship, but so he did. And we were there all day, and my daughter's absolute desire was to photograph a puffin in its native environment. So in the late afternoon, the weather is terrible, it's pouring rain, off we go with some people. And we wind up, there's a shelter where the bus will stop and you hike up to this sort of stone house, that is a bird watching shelter, but it's on the edge of a cliff. So I'm walking out there and Susan just disappeared. She went over the cliff. And I thought, how am I ever going to explain this to her husband and her father? I didn't let her drown in a bathtub when she was little, but now in Iceland, she has just disappeared over a cliff. And eventually, she came up, and what had happened, she had so startled the puffin colony that they all went up and said, sort of in rude puffinese, what the, and so she got these great photos of these puffins looking completely astounded. And then she won a contest on the ship, and then afterward with her great puffin photos from. So I loved the island, and eventually we sailed away to Reykjavik, where the weather was even worse, and the Blue Lagoon was a nightmare.
That's why I'm here. It's nice here. But we actually have a lot of puffins in the next book.
Oh, good.
Because it's this island where the puffins live, and it's a treacherous place to visit because they have all these puffin holes in the ground, because they just roam freely there and make their nests or whatever it is in the ground.
Burrows.
So you can easily break your leg if you get stuck in one of those. And there is, as I said, there is one house on this small island, and it's a hunting lodge. And it was used for the people from Hamay who came over there and to hunt the puffins.
Okay. Was it for food?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, eggs.
Well, I remember
Yeah.
in the Faroe Islands the first time I went, people were eating puffins the way we would eat Kentucky Fried Chicken. It was really depressing, but it was a major protein source.
Yeah. And I don't think they do it anymore because it's
I think they're
rather
protected now, aren't they?
endangered. But I was going to in the book I was going to describe or at least say that the hunting lodge was for hunting puffins. But then I did this book event in the UK a couple of years ago, when I was either writing or thinking of this book, and I started talking about this island, and I told the crowd, a room full of readers, that there was this place where the people hunt puffins, and there was like a big gas for everyone, and you know it was such a, I think to everyone, at least in that audience, I don't know about here, the thought of killing puffins was such a horrible idea that I deleted all references about puffin killing from the book.
I suspect that this is the Icelandic version of killing a cat in an American history, which you can kill any number of people, but lay a finger on a cat, and you know, you're doomed. So possibly the puffin is the Icelandic version. So back to Ari Thor. He's stationed there. He's had a difficult romance. She found it too isolating and went back to, was it Akureyri? I don't think she went all the way to Reykjavik.
No,
she went back to Akureyri.
Yeah.
So that's been part of the story. And the senior policeman is gone, and so Ari is now the senior policeman.
Yeah.
But he was a junior when he first went there.
Yeah, so he moves there as like his first job, and he leaves his girlfriend back home in Reykjavik, and he doesn't even, you know, consult with her. He just accepts the job, and that causes the first sort of tension between them. And throughout these 5 books, it's always like there's always quite a bit of tension, and their relationship is pretty much on and off.
Is she a doctor?
She's a doctor,
right.
Yeah.
So she would be hard for her to stay all the time in a small place. If
Yes,
she wanted to be a successful.
Absolutely, yeah. And you know, they also know that in the end she will probably have to go abroad to specialize, because doctors who learn in the university in Iceland, they always, if they, to specialize in something, they go to Sweden or the US. So that's also like a part of. So they know they will be separated at some point, and yeah. So I don't know, or maybe I know how they're.
You just don't want to tell us. No.
Yeah.
So there's not a lot of homegrown crime, or it didn't used to be in Iceland, but then the whole financial thing at least gave you the possibility of writing about, because Iceland, if you remember, had a major issue in the financial collapse of, when was it, 2008?
Yeah, but sort of, I don't know if it's surprising or not, but it hasn't really been like, used a lot in Icelandic crime fiction. Not a lot. There are authors that have touched upon it, but maybe it's just too close to us in time.
I was just thinking financial fraud is it doesn't have to be that particular thing, but
No.
follow the money has always worked out well in crime fiction. So
It's true. But maybe it's not just exciting enough. I don't know. There weren't any murders in the financial collapse. It was just just financial.
I think for many Americans, Iceland really came to their attention when the volcano went off and blanketed traffic. We were in New Jersey for 5 days waiting to fly to France, and eventually got to Toulouse because the blanket of ash, had drifted in that direction. And Iceland is still it's on the continental plate divide. And there are active volcanoes, so I mean, it's like Hawaii. It's an exciting geology and geography.
Yeah, we have a volcano go off every I would say maybe 3, 4, 5 years, somewhere in Iceland. During the last decade, I think we had 2 or 3 eruptions.
Right.
But this one was particularly strong, and this was in 2010, so it was like a year and a half or 2 years after the financial collapse, and the Icelandic economy really collapsed because all the big banks went bankrupt. The currency weakened by probably 100%. So it became very expensive for Icelanders to travel, and it became cheap for tourists to come to Iceland for the first time in a long time, because it was always an expensive destination. And then we had the volcano, and I think, as you say, it really, people thought this will be the end of us, because now we had a little bit of tourism, but people thought this would be this would mean no one would ever come, because they would be the only thing they would know of Iceland was this horrible volcano. but actually it had the exact opposite effect, because we had the tourist, boom like we'd never seen before after this, and it hasn't still stopped. It is really, it's basically been the biggest reason for the revival of the economy in Iceland, the tourism.
Well, part of it's the cruise industry, because it's an excellent destination, and as global warming goes up, they're now actually touring Greenland. Who knew? But the other part is Icelandic Air has this really terrific program where if you buy a ticket on Icelandic Air, you can stop in Iceland for, I can't remember if it's like 7 or 9 days. You can stay, and then you can go on to, let's say, Bergen, Norway, or wherever it was you were going. So they've really done, because most airlines, you can't do that. If you stop for more than 3 hours, bad things happen to you. So I think that your country has worked very hard in promoting tourism and making it attractive and affordable. There's a ring road now that you can drive all the way around, right? Or in good weather.
Yeah, in good weather. Yeah.
Which I've always wanted to do.
Yeah.
The middle of the island. This is where, remember, the astronauts trained in part of Iceland because the terrain was so moon-like, and they thought they could manage it. But I think the coastal road has always been more accessible unless the weather got you.
Yeah. The coastal roads are basically where you go. No one lives in the highland. So Iceland is a very big country, but we only have a population of 350,000, because people only live in the villages around the island and in the capital. So we don't use more than just a fraction of the area. So the highlands are really pristine, and you can go there and probably see places no one's seen if you're lucky. And if you go on a hike there, chances are you won't see anyone.
So what made you decide to write a second series? Why did you decide to write about Uda?
I had been writing about Thor for 6 years, and I just felt it was time for a change. And Hulda just came to me in a way. I had all the elements, her backstory, and even down to the smallest details of her life, what type of car she was driving, all that, I had sort of prepared. I actually wrote it down on a piece of paper for my publisher in Iceland, and said this is the next series I want to write. It's this woman, and you can see her whole life story here, and I want to tell her story in reverse. Start with her last case, and they said, why not? And so that's how she came about. And basically the series is in a way, it's her life story, but it's also 3 or 4 big cases that she's worked on. But I think a big part of it is just getting to know this woman, and why she has had such a difficult life. And as I say, we start when she's 64, and we see that she's at that age, she's alone. She's lost her husband, she's lost her daughter, and gradually we see why, what happened, and even flashbacks from her childhood, or very early childhood.
There aren't that many sleuths who really have kind lives. Although you mentioned Miss Marple, I mean, she. If you watch the dramatizations, the more recent ones, they've tried to give her a whole story about the war and losing somebody she loved, and one of those English women who couldn't find a husband because all the men were dead, that kind of thing. But in the books, she doesn't really. She's always kind of. Murder at the Vicarage, in fact, the first Miss Marple is, I think, Agatha Christie's really funny book. I mean, there's a lot of humor in it. It's really my favorite in that sense. And I'm not sure that Miss Marple changes much from Murder at the Vicarage. No matter how many years pass, she's still kind of the same.
Yeah, I think that's right.
But Hulda do you think you can even write a person like that today, or do you have to give somebody a much more challenging life to make it interesting?
In a way, I think you must dig a little bit deep, and I think you have to tell the sort of the backstory, the life story of the main protagonist, and it doesn't need to be filled with horror or but there has to be something there. I think you have to emphasize with with the hero. You have to understand him, and I think the same goes for the for the killer in a modern detective story. I think you need to be able to understand why he does the things he does.
Unless you've chosen a psychopath, in which case
Yes.
all bets are off.
Yeah.
But you also really, I think, really great crime novels, you also mourn the victim. You really
Absolutely,
and,
yeah.
Christie, sometimes her victims were just convenient.
Yeah.
The old man who invited all his relatives home so he could say he was changing his will and disinheriting them. Oh, surprise, that one of them killed him. But I think that's,
Yeah.
he didn't really feel badly, when he died, but really, it's good if your victim can touch our hearts as well.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's often like a problem because there is this need in a crime novel or a thriller. There is this need for instant thrills, or so you have to you often have to kill someone at the beginning of the book to get it started. But for me, it's the best thing is if you can get to know the victim a little bit before. So, as you say, so you can sort of sympathize.
So, assuming you didn't start out either as a policeman or a serial killer, what was your background? What did you bring to writing crime fiction?
That's a good question. I'm a lawyer by training, but I don't think that's really brought a lot of. I don't think I've really brought a lot of the law into my books. I've more or less tried to stay away from it, just to try and keep these two worlds separate.
Well, why did you jump from law, or maybe you're still practicing?
I still am, yeah.
Why did you decide you wanted to write mystery?
Yeah, because I love mysteries. It's my big hobby in life is just reading good crime novels.
Yeah.
Ever since I was a young boy, and so that's just the stories I wanted to write, and I've always been writing as well. Ever since I was just 6 years old or something, just writing stories. But it sort of seemed like a step too far to actually publish a novel. But then I said tried. Why not? I have been translating Agatha Christie books into Icelandic for years. Again, as a hobby, just while I was in law school and while I was working. And I had this idea of a story with Thor. And I had started to write it, and then there was this competition in Iceland. And that was 10 years ago. And there was this publisher, they were looking for the next Dan Brown. And that was just after, the Da Vinci Code had been popular for a few years, and Dan hadn't written another book at that point, and people were waiting for his next book. So they, this publisher in Iceland had this idea of let's look for the Icelandic Dan Brown, and so that's basically the reason I finished my book, because there was this deadline, there was this competition, and I knew someone would actually, read the manuscript. And in the end, they didn't find an Icelandic Dan Brown, so there was no winner in the competition. But but they wanted to publish my book, and they did so for one more author who's still writing as well. So this competition sort of, at least created.
Triggered your.
Yeah. And they published the book, and they, when they published, they said, why don't you do another one with the same character, and I'm still with this publisher in Iceland, 10 books later.
So tell us a little bit about Iceland Noir, because there's a terrific crime conference in November. You can go to Iceland and hang out with mystery writers.
November?
Well, yes, you might go November, but in fact you can see the Northern Lights, and let's face it, you're going to be indoors anyway if you're hanging out with crime novelists, so, and also the tourists aren't there, so you can afford it.
Yeah, we have it's a festival we set up with Quentin Bates, whom we spoke about earlier, and my friend Yrsa Sigurðardóttir, who is
I'm never going to be able to pronounce that. I can do Yrsa.
Yrsa, yeah, who's a fellow crime writer from Iceland. We had this idea. It was like 6 years ago now. We we'd met all these, you know, American English authors who wanted to come to Iceland and needed an excuse to come. And they were always asking us, you know, why isn't there like a crime festival in Iceland? So we thought, you know, let's just do it. And that was May 2013, and we said to ourselves, we'll do it November that same year. So we had a few months to prepare, and I think we sort of managed to pull it off. And we had some fantastic authors. For the first year, I think it was Anne Cleves and Peter James, and then we've had like a lot of great authors come over, and at first we did it like every year for 2 years, 2013, 2014, and then it was just too much work because we all have books to write and lives to live. It's just like a hobby to do this festival, and now it's every 2 years. So the last one was in last November. And the next one will be 2020, and it's always middle of November. It's always more or less the week before Thanksgiving, the U.S. Thanksgiving, from a Thursday to a Sunday, and next for the next one we have already confirmed Ian Rankin, Anthony Horowitz, Louise Penny, and Anne Cleves.
It's a wonderful lineup.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
I would come for Anthony Horowitz, who's only been here once, and it was so. I'm such a fangirl for Foyle's War, and of course, what is the other Midsummer Murders has gone on forever, which he didn't write. Carolyn Graham wrote the actual book. I was actually on the River Dart with her at a CWA conference, and we were floating down the river to Greenways, Agatha Christie's house, and Carolyn Graham, who had written this first book, in which I won't tell you the name, so I won't spoil it, but it's powered by incest, which at that point was a long time ago was a pretty difficult topic for a novel to cover. And she announced that it was going to be a television series. We all almost fell into the river. We went, seriously? How are they going to film this story? You know? And then Anthony Horowitz, there he was, and they did, and they actually did leave, although it was very lightly touched upon, but they did leave in the primary, you know, the motivation behind, and it's still on.
13 seasons.
I know, and he doesn't write them all, but he's incredibly versatile.
That's one of the best written series I think I've ever watched. The writing's excellent.
Yeah, it is. I think Foyle's War is like, I've watched it now, I think 3 different times, and you know, I'm always fascinated. But he too now is writing Agatha Christie.
He's writing Sherlock Holmes, and
but he's also done.
And he wrote a lot for the Poirot series.
But he's got a book where he's doing himself as a character, and isn't that the one that's likened to a Christie? I know it's not.
It's very it is. It's
it's structure.
It's a fantastic series.
The sentence is murder or something. I think is the new
the
one.
word is murder, and the sentence
and
is
the
death.
sentence.
Yeah.
Oh, that's it. Right.
Yeah, I was actually reading that like this week.
Right. It's coming out in June.
Okay.
Over here. It's been out in the UK.
Yeah, it has
right.
been. It's I can absolutely recommend that series. It's really well done, and it has this golden age touch to it. It's Agatha Christie feel. Lots of clues, and you know, it's so cleverly done. And he's a character.
He is a character.
Clever,
no, he's wonderful. I really enjoyed having him here and meeting him. So before we open it up for questions, could you list a few Icelandic crime writers for us so that we will know, in theory, how to pronounce them?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have Arnaldur Indriðason,
Who wrote Jar City, which was the first really kind of breakout Icelandic crime novel, if I think that's right.
It was, absolutely.
Yeah, he won he actually caused a big controversy in England because he was nominated and won one of their daggers, and at that point the homegrown English authors said, we can't have an Icelandic author winning our dagger, and so they created the international dagger as a way to deal with it.
Yeah. And then we have Yrsa Sigurðardóttir.
Say it again?
Yrsa Sigurðardóttir.
Okay.
You know her?
I do.
She's very good.
There's another woman who's new.
Yeah, she's called Lilja, and she's also Sigurðardóttir, but they are not related in any way.
No, but there's still another one who's not a serious daughter, and I can't think of what her name is at the moment. Starts with an H, I think. I'm just going blank. Does anybody remember? And it's you and Arnold Durr and
Yeah,
who
that
mind
way-
the man at Quinton, but he's not doing
Yeah,
that
Quinton.
now.
Yeah. He's still doing his Icelandic series.
Oh, he is?
So yeah,
Okay,
he has a new one out. He had a new one out in the UK at least this year.
okay.
And there are more. There is this guy called Victor Arnar Ingolfsson. He's done like 3 or 4 in the US. I think
Yeah.
they're published by Amazon. So they're probably mostly in ebooks, but they were published as well as books. They're really good. They're sort of old-fashioned crime novels. There's one more called Árni Thor. I think he was also published by Amazon. So some of his books should be in America. Yeah.
Well,
I hope I'm not
since
forgetting anyone.
Iceland is such it has one of the highest reading rates in the world. I mean, the population, although small, apparently spends lots of his time in bookstores and libraries. Yay. What did they read? Did they read your Icelandic people, or did they tend to read, crime from other countries, or do you know?
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Well, we actually read a lot of crime from other countries, mostly Scandinavian in translation. But every year, the best-selling books in Iceland are Icelandic novels, and the crime novels are usually, probably 3 or 4 of the top 5 best-selling books every year is Icelandic crime fiction. So that's what we read.
It's terrific. Now, do you all have questions that you would like to ask Ragnar?
See any hands go up? First one.
I just wanted to ask, you mentioned Bates writing more, so he has, I think, 4 in this country.
Okay. Yeah, I know there was one out just this year in
Okay.
the UK, but I don't know if it's out here yet.
He was published in this country by Soho Press, and I'm not sure that they are still publishing him. But you know what? The editor, who has written a book of her own, is going to be here on May 28th, Juliet. And so you can come and quiz her and find out what's going on with Quentin. Right?
That is one of the best female detectives ever created.
Oh, fantastic. I will tell him. He would be
Yes,
very happy to
please
hear.
do.
There's kind of a nexus between Scottish authors and Icelandic authors, isn't there? It seems to me there's a certain amount of pull in Norway too.
Yeah, there's like a strong link between Scottish and Icelandic crime writers, I think, and we have a lot of Scots coming over for Iceland
Right.
Noir. We even had like a all Scottish panel last year, and I think the books are, the people are very similar. We're so close, and the books are as well, and they have their own tartan noir, which is their
Right.
Scottish noir,
Exactly.
and I think if they want to be like a part of the Nordic noir, we always let them.
While Patrick King is standing there, this is a good time for me to wave goodbye to our Facebook audience, and thank you all for joining us this evening.